Before we look at the data in Splunk, let's be sure our containers are running. So the command is docker compose up. If you already see this from the last video, you can just skip this step. Now the other thing we'll need to do, which you may or may not be able to skip, is start the Splunk forwarder itself. And we'll do that in a second terminal. The command is docker exec -it web1. And then we can actually just say the whole path of the Splunk forwarder here rather than opening a bash terminal. So we'll say opt Splunk forwarder. Unfortunately, tab completion doesn't work in this format. Forwarder /bin Splunk start. You can also use the terminal if you prefer. So I'll clear the screen and I'll just run that same command again, but with web 2. And we'll clear the screen again. So now our two forwarders should be running. So let's go to a web browser on our Splunk server. And we can click on search and reporting. And to start, let's just put in star for the search. And we'll set it to just the last 15 minutes. Now I've been playing with this a little bit, so I've got quite a bit of data here, but you should only see just a little in the last couple minutes if you've just started yours up. You might need to let it run for a while and then come back and look at this later. So the first thing you might notice is that in our selected fields for host, now we have 2 instead of 1. So let's click on that. And here we have web 2 and web 1. So both of our servers are now sending data to our Splunk server. Let's click on one of these. And here's where it's narrowed it down just to that one server. So now that we have 2 different servers sending in data to our Splunk server, this is where things can get really powerful because you can create complex searches across systems using the more advanced search syntax. So say you had a database and a web server, you could actually search for application errors that involved the database. You could compare database errors and application errors side by side, and you might be able to track down when the root cause of an issue is not on the application itself, but something related to the database. For a setup like what we have with 2 web servers, we might be comparing the error rates across 2 different versions of a web app. So maybe there's a bug that we didn't catch in testing that we ended up deploying, and now we see a bunch of errors appearing. That means users are encountering a bug. So let's look at how we might search for that kind of thing. Let's change our search to source type equals access underscore combined. Let's start with that. I've noticed sometimes with our containers, it won't start correctly the first time. So we'll go to our terminal and just run a restart command on these. Seems to be a quirk of the container system. So instead of start, we'll say restart. That's on web 1. And I'll just run the same command, but change it to web 2. This may or may not happen for you. I've noticed it happens to me occasionally. So let's go back to the web browser. And we'll run that search again. There's our data. So we'll search for access combined. And let's also say and status not equal 200. So we've got some errors coming in. If we want to visualize this in a better way than just this default graph, we could say pipe time chart count by host. Let's search for that. So there's our raw data, and we'll click over to visualization. Here we can see those results coming in. And in this case, I think it's more helpful to have a line chart, even though it's not strictly accurate. Just a little better visibility, in my opinion. Let's change up this search a bit. And we haven't done this in the previous lessons, but instead of filtering here within the original part of the search, we can actually filter within the count statement. So we'll say count and then eval status not equal 200 and close those parentheses out. What this is doing is it's supplying all of the data to the time chart command. and then filtering within the count. So it's only counting things that match that specific status. So let's search for that. It should give us the same result. So let's expand this a bit more and compare between successes and failures. So errors and successes. So we'll keep this first part. So let's expand this a bit more. And we can compare between the successes and the failures. So the errors and the successes in our log. So we'll say as, after this count command, count as error. So we're going to label those status not equal to 200, results as error. And then we'll add a comma and another count, count eval status equals 200. And then close those parentheses. And we'll say as success. Now if we run this search, now we see a result comparing the rates on our different web servers. And you can see we can actually mouse over these to highlight the different results. We can actually add this to the dashboard we created earlier. But before we do that, let's make sure we set the time picker to be the last 24 hours so that it matches the rest of that dashboard. And then we'll go up to Save As, Existing Dashboard, and select Web Successes and Errors. And then we'll say, for the panel title, Status Code by Host. And click Save to Dashboard. And let's view that dashboard. So here we've got our line charts from earlier. So here is our new graph. You see we don't have much data yet. You can see how easy it is to compare across our different servers between the error and success rates. This is the type of use case that I find most helpful about tools like Splunk. It lets you take a high-level view of your stack and immediately spot where an issue might be happening. If one web server has a spike of errors, it will be immediately obvious on this chart. And that can save you a ton of time when tracking down the cause of an issue.